Welcome to Real Life Fiction. I'm Matt James with Conundrum Publishing, international best-selling author of the Jack Riley Adventure series. And today I'll be talking to author Anthony M. Strong. Tony, thanks for coming on the show, my friend. How you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. So, how has everything been? I know you've been traveling a lot lately.
We have, my wife and I bought a cabin. Well, not really a cabin, more of a cottage up in Maine, on an island in Maine, earlier in the year. So we spent the summer up there. And then
Cool.
we came down just before Nink, beginning of September. And then I've been writing ever since, just
Jeez,
locked away in here and typing
nice.
away.
Yeah, I actually have a not a childhood friend, I guess a younger adult friend. His family has a cabin on a lake up in Maine, and this was, I mean, I haven't seen him in about 10 years, but yeah, he goes, It's you can say it and you can, but until you're there and you see it, it's magical." And
It is.
yeah, yeah, and that's cool because we've been wanting to move. We've been because so we're both in Florida right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been here my whole life, and I've my wife and I have been like chomping at the bit to move. We've fallen in love with the Appalachians. We love like Southern Tennessee. We love like that area, and it's as cliche as it gets. Like the people are awesome. Everybody's so nice. And, oh, no, it's true. I mean, we go up there and it's actually kind of it's a breath of fresh air, quite literally, because you're up in the mountains and it's cool. There's seasons. Like, what are those? And it's just my area of South Florida down in West Palm Beach is like it's becoming or has become like a vacation destination for
Yeah.
a lot of people, which is cool because there's a lot of small businesses down here that are like loving it. I mean, because that's what you want. But as like a permanent resident and lifetime resident of this area, it's awfully annoying. And it's just we went up to Pigeon Forge, and we went up there for a week for a wedding last year, and it was like it was it was last September, and it was the best week of, I mean, it was easily the best vacation I've ever had. And we did nothing. It was just we just drove around and saw stuff. It wasn't like we didn't have a lot of stuff planned. Wedding
Yeah.
party. It was a wedding destination, so a lot of friends, a lot of people that we knew. So we hung out, but it was like we were at the cabin. We were just like, it's so cool. And then I came home and I was really depressed for a few days. And
And I know what you mean. You know, the people in the place where we bought is it's a little town. It's only got, like, in the winter it only has like, I think, 900 or 1,000 residents,
well,
and it's the largest lobster port in Maine. So
oh
that's all they do. They go out, they lobster, and then they bring the trucks in and truck it off to the mainland, and off it goes. But when we went down to the town hall to pay our taxes that were due while we were there, um, we were talking to the town hall manager, who's pretty much the only person that works there. And I mean, she knows every single person in the town. She can tell you all the neighbors, how long they've been there.
wow,
Everyone in the town knows everyone. You know, you go to the post office and they comment on the fact that you repaired the deck or that you put new railings up. They just, everyone knows everyone by sight. No one locks their doors. It's a completely different world to Florida.
yeah,
You know, I'm close to Kennedy Space Center
hmm,
and Cocoa Beach, and you know, you wouldn't go to bed and leave your doors unlocked in this area. I mean, it's a nice enough area. We live on a golf course. You know, we've got nice
yeah.
neighbors, but you know, when they said, I mean, they don't even lock their cars. They'll just get out of them and go places and leave the cars unlocked. It's like another world up there.
Yeah, I
And
mean, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I mean, we're super safe down here too, where I am. I mean, I don't have a lot of worries and stuff like that, but it as safe as my area is, you get into some of these other areas, and you're like, wow,
yeah,
you didn't, because I mean, I'm very familiar from where you are. I mean, I love Cocoa. My family owned a bowling alley in Satellite Beach
really,
for like 15 years, actually, maybe closer to 20 years. and he sold it. My dad sold it a month before Hurricane Francis blew it down.
Oh,
So when the
I,
Francis and Jean hit us back to back and destroyed most of that area,
yeah.
like obliterated Satellite Beach, which sucks because it's such a beautiful little community, a little island. I actually once saw it on an episode of Cops. I saw a high-speed chase
Oh,
through Satellite Beach, Florida, and it was a
wow.
very short chase because it was like island, no island. It was just like the stretch is tiny. But yeah, we
Yeah,
owned a bowling alley up there, so we would go up to Cocoa all the time. We'd watch the shuttle take off from Satellite Beach
yeah,
because of the way Cocoa and Kennedy juts out into the Atlantic. So you could
yeah.
just stand on the beach, look north, and see it perfectly. And we love it up there. We love taking our kids up to Cocoa because we love Ron John. We just like that whole area.
Right.
Ron John Surf Shop. If nobody
Yeah.
knows, if you're in that area, you have to check it out.
Oh, yeah.
Gorgeous area. So
Yeah.
Anthony M. Strong, Tony.
Yes.
For those that don't know you, excuse me, that aren't necessarily familiar with your work, maybe have seen the name on Amazon when they're clicking on pages. But tell us a little bit about yourself as a writer. Mainly, what is your key work, I guess?
I kind of have two aspects to the work. The first one, of course, is the supernatural thrillers, the John Decker series. I'm working on the 11th book in that series right now, and I write those under Anthony M. Strong, and then under the pen name A.M. Strong, my wife and I have just started a um, FBI thriller series. So we are doing straight thrillers
Cool.
under that pen name, and we've got 3 of those out, and then I have the 4th one to complete before February.
Oh, very good, very good. Yeah, your Decker series is going through a facelift, if I'm not mistaken, right? With
It
the
is. We
covers
are
and
in the
stuff.
process of redesigning the covers. We looked at, we've had some of these covers since like 2016, some of the earliest covers, and they're just not. They just weren't where we wanted them to be. So we're in the
Sure.
process of redesigning all the covers. We're even thinking of lengthening the first novel because it was a shorter book. It was never meant to be a series. I wrote it as a one-off and moved on to other stuff. And then people kept asking if there was going to be a follow-up to John Decker. So that's really how the series started. But it was intended as a one-off. Otherwise, I would have planned it better as a gateway into a series instead of the way I did it, where it was basically a one-off schlocky horror book,
Hmm.
almost like a B movie in book form. And so I would have done a better job of planning it as a series opening if I'd have thought it was ever going to become a long running series. But yeah, so we're redesigning all of those right now. We're looking at getting them all. There's a few that aren't in hardback yet that we're working on.
Yep.
Um,
I'm doing the
so
same thing right now.
that's where we are
Yeah.
right now with them.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing with my Jack Riley series. I got the 4th one in hardback as soon as it was published, basically, because it was available. I mean, that's a new
Yeah,
thing. That's a new thing that Amazon's offering is the hardcover printing, and they're beautiful. I was actually very impressed with just the quality. I was a little frightened because designing a book, if people don't know, for paperback and for hardcover is very different
yeah,
as far as like the templates and stuff you're using. So shifting artwork, doing this, you're like, oh god, like I already got it right once, now I have to do it again. But yeah, no, it's a new process. I'm really excited to be able to, now I'm updating. I just sent off the first book in the Jack Riley series to publisher to have it published as hardcover, and then I'll start working
yeah.
on books 2 and 3, and then from now on I'll do all of the art paperback and hardback immediately, and send it off just in the process. So it's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
I guess I'm lucky from that regard. I was a graphic designer working in publishing before I became a writer. So my job was literally doing that stuff. I
Yeah,
did a lot
it's
of
definitely a
magazine
leg up.
work, and
Yeah.
so I have the advantage that I was already doing it for other people beforehand, got fed up with it, and then ended up doing it for myself. So
Yep.
I guess that's a double-edged sword. But the only thing I don't like about the Amazon hardcovers is that they don't have the slip cases on them, which is a shame.
Yeah, yeah. I was trying to figure out if there's a way to do those aftermarket. I'm sure there is. With you literally have the dimensions of the book, and there's got
Yeah,
to be like a way to apply that to the dust cover, the slip cover, and have it done. I'm like, that would be
Right.
kind of neat. Because I mean, the dimensions of a hardcover are the same no matter what. So if
Yes.
there's a printing press that all they need is the dimensions that like of the template that you get from Amazon, then I don't see why it can't be done. That would be kind of cool. I get why they don't do it because that's just added expense in printing on their end. So I mean, maybe they will down the road as this becomes a thing.
I'm kind of surprised they don't, because it sounded like they were trying to compete with Ingram, who do provide that service. So
Yep.
I'm kind of surprised that they didn't jump all in on that and do it that way.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I was actually kind of what's cool is like I remember when I was doing all of my self-publishing and I would do my paperbacks and I would see that they're being printed in South Carolina. That was one of the more common big
Yeah.
printers that Amazon would use. And then now all my books are being printed in Orlando. So it's like obviously it's regional. They know I live in Florida, so
Yeah.
they're using a Florida printer, which is kind of cool. I don't know about you, my hardcovers came from Illinois or Indiana, and I was like, what? I was like, wow, that was I didn't expect it to literally be across the country.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, this is starting to make a little more sense, meaning that they're like obviously they're rolling out the hardcover availability and then probably seeing how it
Yeah.
does. And then as it like they did with the paperbacks, it's like South Carolina, now they have a printer in Florida, now they have a printer here. So I'm sure as time goes, those hardcovers will be printed all over the place instead of maybe
Yeah.
only in a couple of places. And then maybe the next evolution is those slip covers. I don't know. I'm assuming they have all of this figured out by now because I mean we are not Amazon.
But it's Amazon, so they'll take forever to do whatever they do.
Yeah, kind of like Apple approving a podcast.
Indeed.
Sorry, I had to get that. I had to say that. No, we talk books, guys. We talk books. There's nothing you have to approve. So, where did the idea for John Decker come? Like, obviously, I know you said it was a one-off, but
Yeah.
where did kind of I guess the evolution of the character, like, where did it start, and kind of where has it taken you?
It started, I was having a conversation with my wife about basically writing horror novels, and which is really how the John Decker started. It was originally conceived as a almost like I said, a B movie horror novel, like the kind of thing you'd see on a sci-fi channel movie, like not really Sharknado, but that kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of horror. And I had said that, it won't be that hard to write. I could write a book like that in a couple of weeks. So she said, all right, we'll do it then. So I sat down, and I think it took me about 2 weeks to write the first draft of that particular novel. It's a shorter one. Like I said, I think it comes in around 53,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not long, which is why we're thinking about expanding it and doing a second edition. But Decker really just came out from probably movies that I've seen. I watched a lot of horror movies growing up, and I've watched a lot of movies on the Sci-Fi Channel. And there's in a lot of these movies, there's the cop who doesn't think anything's going on, and then there's the monster, and so it really came from that. Like I said, it was almost I don't want to say it was parodying, because it isn't funny, but it was almost like it was almost like kind
There's
of a
like
homage to.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
there's a campiness to it
Yeah,
that's accepted in the
exactly.
realm. Yeah, action adventure's the same thing. There's campiness that's expected because of Indiana Jones and because of like
Exactly.
there's humor. There's I call them the rompy adventures where there's like this little bit more of that laid back kind of loose kind of feel to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And the
horror's
John
got the
Decker
same thing.
character evolved over time as I wrote the books, and I got more into how I was going to turn this into a series, because it
Hmm.
occurred to me that the first book is set in small town Louisiana, in the bayou, which was where we were living at the time. We lived just outside of New Orleans,
Hmm.
so I was basically writing the area around where we lived on the other side of Lake Pontchartrain.
Okay.
And it occurred to me that there wasn't much you could get out of a series doing everything there. You know, it was a small town. How many things can happen to one guy in one town? So I decided to kind of make him more of a global traveler recruited by a shady organization. And that was how the rest of the series came about. But he's morphed over time into more of a, like you said, an Indiana Jones character, because he tends to go to a lot of places. Like one book, he ended up in the Amazon jungle. He's now ended up back in time, because he went to the Bermuda Triangle, and somehow he ends up back in time, and then he ends up in London in 1911. So he kind of gets around, and he ends up in a lot of situations that are less horror and more action adventure these days. With a horror element, there's normally some kind of a monster or something supernatural in there, because that's expected. But he tends to spend a lot more time doing more action adventure-y stuff than just pure horror stuff these days. So the books have morphed a bit over time and become something else.
Yeah, that was the it's funny you say that, because that's exactly what I'm going through in a positive way with my used to be called Dead Moon series, now it's called The Unseen. And we're just republishing it through Conundrum, new covers, re-edits, just full on facelift. And the first book was just called Dead Moon, and the main character is Frank Moon, and it was just supposed to be a New York cop, Florida transplant, so a little bit of me and him, hates cold weather, been living in New York for a decade. So basically how I would be living in New York for a decade. And just monsters, meteor comes, radiation,
Yeah.
and actually sold fairly well. Not great, but I was just throwing books out. I wasn't like, this is what's gonna get me. It was just me writing a story. Then I was like, hey, money, cool. I
Yeah.
wasn't like, I wanted to be a full-time writer, but that was my fourth book I ever wrote. So it was like, just get them out there. I need a portfolio. I need like stuff to advertise. And
Yeah.
had the idea for the story, and I loved it. And then just kind of kept going with other stuff. And I had people asking me, when are we going to see Frank again? And I'm like, I don't really have a book 2 yet. Like it wasn't really like the end of the book was very open, but it wasn't like necessarily planned for a sequel. And then I'm like, I went through and just kind of like reread. Oh no, I was doing the audiobook for it with an audiobook guy with a narrator. So I was going through the book several times and then listening to it and this, and I'm like, I kind of
Yeah.
re fell in love with the story, and I'm like, man, I really want to write a second book. So I just started writing more books in the series, and here we are. And now I'm going to be writing book 5 middle of next year ish, and we'll go from there. And I gave it to Nick, my partner at Conundrum, and he read the first book. This is before I was working with him, and I'm like, hey, I have a series that I think you would like. I think you could do better with it marketing wise and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
so he read the first book and didn't hear back from him. I'm like, because we're both busy family men, so I'm like, I don't push him. And then I text him, and he goes, "Oh, I've just finished book 4." I'm like, what? I'm like, dude, it's been like 8 days. He's like, yeah, I wanted to see what happened. I really liked the first book. I love the characters, because it's
Yeah.
also in first person point of view. So it's, first person present.
Yeah.
So it's like you're in the moment in the character's head. So
Very
it's like
immediate. Yeah.
immediate reactionary everything. So it's very like, holy cow, all of this is happening right now. And it's crazy. And he goes, it's great. He goes, it's perfect for that style of book. But it's back to John Decker. It's not necessarily like, I don't like to pigeonhole it as a horror novel or as like a horror book, because it's very character oriented. It's very
Yeah.
action oriented. It's got a little of those adventure elements in it, where there's a little slapsticky campiness to it. But it's just character driven story that just happens to be in the middle of this monster apocalypse. And here we are. Now I'm
Yeah.
writing the 5th book because I was told to. I
And
wanted to, but now I'm told to.
And talking of which, my wife is reading right now, is reading your book, that the first of your series that you're writing with Nick,
Oh yeah, the Anubis
and
Plague, or
the
Arcane
Anubis
series.
Plague. And she said to me last night, it's very similar to your John Decker prequel, because the after I wrote the second Decker book, we decided we needed a prequel. something to put people into the mailing list. So I wrote Soul Catcher, which is
Mhm.
about the cult of Anubis, and they basically steal an
Yep.
object from a museum and then try to resurrect Anubis.
Yeah, that's pretty darn close. That's funny. Yeah, this was that story in general was just I so like we're busy. Most my main series is Jack Riley, and it's very much more straightforward action thriller, like action adventure, archaeological stuff. So I
Yeah,
try not to bring in more over the top supernatural elements. I try to keep it very grounded in like scientifically explained, like what's happening. Like um, Zara, I wanted to be a little bit more over the top with stuff, so I wanted it to
yeah,
be just that little edgier, that little bit rougher, even the action. I wanted it to be a little bit more, have more of those like unknown elements. And I've always wanted to write about in roundabout way, like biblical plague and like that kind of stuff. And I'm like, so, you go through your research,
yeah,
rabbit holes and you just start reading about stuff. And I'm like, well, what's cool in Egypt? I'm like, well, obviously, the pharaohs, the gods. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I have a lot of influence from the Mummy '99 in that movie or in that book,
right.
which is a huge movie for me. And I made it very apparent when I was writing that book that it was, Mummy '99 was a huge influence. And I'm like thinking, okay, resurrecting this. Okay, I can't, I'm not going to do
Yeah,
like a mummy book because that would be very, at least for me, it would be like total ripoff based on where it came from. And you get into like these certain things. Well, how can I bring in the plague? How can I do this? And I'm like, all right, we're going in this direction. We're going like really, really like really ballsy in my in my head. We're going over the top. We're going huge, and it is what it
and
is.
and Egypt is such a fertile ground for finding things, especially in the
Yeah.
supernatural realm, to write about.
Yeah.
I've returned to it in the book I'm writing now. Actually, Deadly Crossing is set on the Titanic,
Hmm.
and there is a I wouldn't say it, an urban myth, I guess, that when the Titanic sailed, that there was a mummy being transported in the hold of the ship, and that it was the mummy's curse that sank the ship. Now, of course, that's not true, and there's no record of any mummy ever being put on the ship. But the story was that it was going to an American collector, and it was put in the hold, and that was part of what doomed the ship. So I kind of went back to the Egyptian theme as one of the subplots in this new book. So we are actually doing the mummy on the Titanic. So
No, that's
that's where this book is going to go. So it's it's bringing in elements. I don't want to give too much away, but it's bringing in
sure.
elements from Whitechapel Rising. So we're not returning to the cult of Anubis from the prequel, because I thought that was just too obvious a way to go. So we're bringing in elements from Whitechapel Rising, which was about basically Jack the Ripper being a vampire.
Cool.
So we're going to lean heavily into that and bring some of those characters back. But basically, it's going to be a mummy running around the Titanic.
Cool.
Um,
Cool. No, that's see, and that's why I would love to write about that stuff. I mean, I would love to write about that stuff, and I've done similar things in like some in one offs and standalones, and I inevitably just revert right back into my comfort zone, which is just those just like not. I mean, yours has obviously got a lot of historical base to it and stuff,
yeah,
but I do the supernatural thing occasionally, and it just for me personally, at least for the current work that I have, it just doesn't fit right, and it's like I'm not going to jam these elements into a story
right,
unless like you started with it, so it was like
exactly.
that's the expectation, and I don't have that. Like I did like Cradle of Death, which was a theoretically could be a series if I wanted it to be. But the idea for that was it to be like this very open ended, like what if one off. And
Yeah,
it deals with like extraterrestrials and the ancient civilizations of the world. So very, very realistic topic to talk about with a lot of people because there are so many like what ifs around the country that just don't make sense, or around the world that
Yes.
just don't make sense from a human aspect, ancient human aspect. And I was like, wow, what if I actually wrote about aliens developing the ancient world? I'm like, that'd be kind of cool. And what if that was where a lot of the civilizations believed were their gods? And there's a lot of similarities between that, as far as, why is there a tall Caucasian man with white hair in Mayan legends with
Right.
Kukulkan, and Thoth in Egyptian history, a tall, massively smart dude coming from the west of Egypt. And I'm like, well, in their history, the west is the dead, the west side of the Nile. And
Yes.
and the Sahara eons ago was underwater. And I'm like, and it's also one of the maybe resting places of Atlantis. And I'm like, I'm like, this could work. So here we are. I'm like, all right, I need to write about this. So it ended up being obviously very like over the top and like sci-fi,
Yeah.
but tons of historical elements like baked into it and stuff. It was a great book to write, really fun to write. But I couldn't implement that. I wrote that as a side thing because it just didn't work in other
Yeah.
stuff. And like I would love to write about this stuff 24/7. I'm like, man, I don't even know when I'd be able to do it. I got so much other stuff going on. But no, that's cool. So like in this case, Deadly Crossing, not the book itself, but planning the book. So we love to talk about the writing process.
Yes.
And when you have that initial idea for a new novel, what does it look like? So like mine's very visual. I see something, I'm like, oh, that'd be kind of cool. Oh, that's a beautiful location. I wonder if I could write about something in there. And then I Google it and see if there's any historical stuff, treasure, or whatever. And but like with you, like what is it? Where does it kind of start? I guess.
In the case, most of the books start with just pretty much a random conversation. In the case of Deadly Crossing, I came up with the idea over a year ago. Funnily enough, we were driving across to Nink last year, and we stopped at a Zaxby's restaurant
Hmm.
I can't remember where it was. It was somewhere between Orlando and Tampa. And
Probably like
when we went
Lakeland
in
area.
there, yeah, I think it was around Lakeland, and
Hmm.
they had a bunch of stuff on the walls, like weird stuff in cases and like strange display type cut stuff. And one of the things they had was a display case set up over the door, and it had like a sideways view of a wood carving of the Titanic sitting in it. And
Cool.
I'm sitting there eating, and I looked up and I said to Sonia, my wife, "Oh, it'd be really cool if we could put Decker on the Titanic." And so it just started from seeing that object in that restaurant. And then the only problem was, of course, that Decker is set in current times. Titanic sank in 1912.
Hmm.
So that was an issue. But at the time, I just started writing. I was working on a book, but set in the Bermuda Triangle, where Decker ends up um, going back in time to the 1940s. And so rather than have him, my original intention was to have him just do one adventure back there. At the end of the book, he gets back home. And then I thought, well, I can just send him further back in time and drop him into the center of London. So that was where the idea came. The problem was I had to do another book in between because I couldn't just drop him there and put him straight on the Titanic.
Yeah.
So we had to
You
obviously
needed a
develop
bridge. You needed a bridge story.
we
Yeah.
needed
Yeah.
a backstory to
Sure.
why he was there. We needed to um, let it breathe a bit before we dumped him straight on this ship and develop it. So that's where the idea came from. And then, of course, we wrote that bridge story, and I still didn't really have any idea what he was going to do on the Titanic, other than that he was going to be on it. So we quite my wife and I will quite often chat back and forth. We'll go to Orlando or drive other places and we'll talk. And so we came up with the basic premise of one of the characters in the book in the previous book being abducted, and Decker has to get her back, and she's being taken to America on the Titanic. So that gave me a premise. And
Gotcha.
I didn't really have the whole thing planned out. I had an idea what the end would be, because we all know what the end of the Titanic is. So that was going to be the end of the books, one way or another. Um, but I didn't have any idea. Every book for the Decker series needs to have some kind of supernatural element, and I didn't have any idea what it was, except that I'd read this myth about this mummy being put in the hold of the Titanic. And like you said, writing about ancient cultures, there's a lot of fertile ground in there for um, folklore, and the Egyptians were very good at monsters anyway. I mean, all
Yeah,
their gods were basically monsters. So it was very easy to come up with, let's just take the mummy and make that one of the elements of the book. And then we came up with the idea of bringing back in the characters, that the bad guys from Whitechapel Rising, who were these almost, they not vampires in traditional sense, but they could basically steal your life force by killing you. So whatever years you had left, they got.
gotcha.
So um, we decided to bring those characters back in because that book was popular and people liked the Jack the Ripper character, who we turned into one of these creatures. So we decided to bring them back in, and then it was really just a case of trying to plan the book. And the way that I tend to do it, I don't like writing without knowing where I'm going, because that's a good way to end up with a deadline at Amazon of uploading your book and having half of it done and not knowing how to finish it.
Yeah,
So I decided that, a long time ago, I kind of fell into a rhythm where I will plan out the beginning and kind of a very rough draft of the middle, like what's going to happen, but not necessarily chapter by chapter. And then what the end of the book is, like where you're going with it, so that we don't end up in the weeds with the book. Um, and then what I'll tend to do is I'll just wing it for the first 10 or 15 chapters to see how the book develops and get into it. And then I will go back and plan much more in depth the middle through to the end of the book. Um, because I find that once I've written some of the book, I've got a good idea of the direction and the tone and where it needs to go. The few times that I've sat down and tried to plan an entire book chapter by chapter before I started writing, the middle changes by the time I get there, and all that work from, say, chapter 20 onwards is, I won't say it's wasted, but it changes significantly, because I've had ideas as I wrote the first 10 or 20 chapters that have changed where it should be going in the middle.
yeah,
So I tend to plan the beginning of it, come up with the basic idea, plan the beginning, know where I'm going to the end, and then once I've gotten to a point where I'm like, okay, I've got enough, I know where this book is going, then I will plan the middle chapters right through to the end, and then and sometimes I'll do that chapter by chapter, other times I'll just do bullet points. Recently I've just been doing bullet points of all the major character arcs and all the major story plot points that I want to get in, and then I'm just writing to those. So I might have 20 or 30 plot points of what the characters are doing, where they're going, what they're facing, and then I'll just write to that, rather than doing a rigid chapter outline.
yeah. I've tried. I don't want to say I've tried hard, but I've tried to do more traditional outlining, just because I like the idea. So I've talked to a lot of writers. Conversation wise, Rick Chesler kind of explained it the best, and he's purposely written different ways to see what works.
Yeah,
And he's done complete pantser, completely off the cuff, and he goes, "Story came out great, but it took me twice as long to write
yeah,
because you're making up stuff up as you go." Okay, I get that. He goes, "I've also done like chapter by chapter outline, 50, 60 chapters. I know exactly what's going to happen. I can write the book in a week if I have the time to
yeah,
actually sit down and do it." He goes, "Because I never have a dead point in the story." And I'm like, true. That's 100% true. Um, but I was talking to him, and I also got the sense that the story being planned out so much just doesn't feel right to me, as just the writer.
right.
I like to develop the story as I go. I'm very, very much the same as you. I always know how I'm going to start the story. At least with me, there's usually some sort of like period piece at the beginning that kind of sets up everything.
Exactly.
Gets
Yeah.
that MacGuffin, gets that kind of, and it's kind of, I know where I want to drop the hero, in this case, Jack, and the trouble he gets into. And cause I start right away, I don't let it breathe. It's like, boom, what the heck's going on? And like, I can do that for quite a while and just let it take me. Cause I've already been,
Yeah.
all the windows that I have open, my notes that I have written down, like I know where I want it to go. And about halfway, 2/3 of the book is where I really start to get deep into like, okay, you know how you want it to end. You've gotten this far. Now, plan it and go. And then so
Right.
I'll tend to slow down, pull back a little bit when I get to that time frame, 40, 50,000 words, and I'll go, okay, this is like, gonna hit the pedal to the metal and just go, but we need to have it situated first. We need to have it like planned out first. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like that, quick start, kind of pause, let it breathe, let it see where it's going, and then start up again and go. And then the end of the book, usually I fly through it because I've already had all of this, tension and story built up.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it's a very similar process.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and I do find that once I get to that middle point and I start to plan the rest of the book in detail and I do the chapters or the bullet points, it does write itself fairly quickly because you're not sitting there at the end of a chapter thinking, all right, who's next? What am I going to do next?
Yeah.
You know where it's going. You know every beat of the story, so it's very easy to just fly through those chapters at that point.
Yeah. No, agreed. I totally agree. Yeah. I like I said, I've done it in a few different ways. And for me, it's like, I'll have my Word file open and I'll have, um, what I do is I format in bold for like I guess the outline, and it'll be like POV Jack. It'll be, okay, what's happening here? And then I'll do that for like 3 or 4 chapters to kind of get like the direction,
Yeah.
and then finish writing a chapter, move on to the next chapter, see what I have planned out. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. A lot of the time, what ends up happening is now that outline gets pushed back an extra chapter because I've now added in so much other stuff
Right.
that wasn't planned. So the book ends up, like I've told people, my books have gotten longer and longer the last few I've written, and it's totally on accident. It's just I'm part purposely, part not willing to go the extra distance to
Yeah.
like explain something, where in my younger writing years I wasn't. I was more like, no, this has to be very straightforward, it has to be very fast, it has to be very, nonstop. And yes and no. Like, I still believe that in some cases, like my Unseen series is like that because of the POV that it's in.
Yeah.
Like, it's purposely never stops because it's just easy to write that way in that style. Plus, I think it just makes more
Exactly.
sense. It makes more sense in that style. But action adventure, in my case, there's so much to see and so much to do that it for me, it's a disservice not to write about it. I feel like I'm cheapening the experience if I don't write about the beauty of Nepal. Because
Exactly.
why am I there? Like, as the writer, I'm there because of how awesome that area is, at least what I believe it is, because I've never been there. But but that's the idea. Is it's like, I want to write about all this stuff because I want to experience it too, not just the reader. And it's the last few books I've done it in where I'm more than willing to kind of like, I guess, go off on a little tangent while the story goes. Um, I, People have responded well to it. So I'm like, okay, I guess my books are now, instead of 75, 85,000 words, they're now 120. It's like, now they're full length, 6-digit,
Right.
traditional novels. And I'm like,
Yeah.
holy crap. But hey, here we are. But, like I said, this is my favorite thing to talk about. And it's the influences, kind of behind the scenes on why we do what we do, why we
Yes.
write. And for me, it was movies. It always has been movies. My wife told me to shut up about critiquing movies and to tell my own story, I guess. And that became my first book. And I kind of realized that I could do it, and tried to become a writer. And I've always considered myself a storyteller who's still learning how to write. And just because, like, it plays in your head, but it's hard to put it
Yeah.
down into words. Um, and I guess that's me being more visual than I am, I guess, like that. I don't
And
know. It's
sometimes
hard.
you see those movie scenes in your head, but
Hmm.
you don't have the advantage of camera angles
No.
and all those other things. So, like you said, it is harder to sometimes to translate what you're
Yep.
seeing in your head, because my scenes tend to play out very cinematically as well.
Yeah.
It
Because you
is
can't explain the
sometimes
camera angle in a novel.
exactly, you
It's
can't
like,
show the low angle with the sun behind the character, and so it's
no.
very hard to sometimes to get over exactly what you see in your head on paper.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Absolutely. So, like me, it's Indiana Jones, it's Uncharted, it's Tomb Raider, it's Mummy 99, National Treasure. It's like it's a lot of those rompy action adventures that just a lot of us grew up loving and still love as the years go by. And then there's some other, like, I don't really get into a lot of horror with stuff, but like I kind of appreciate the creativity of it because it is very, very different. Like a lot of the stuff that I write, it's heavily based on like the history of the area. So there's
Yeah,
research wise, there's a lot more to go on. A lot of like what you're doing too with the supernatural crossover with a lot of your historical stuff. Um, it's it's a blending of different genres, and doing it right
it
is not
is.
always the easiest thing to do because is it a supernatural book or is it a horror book? Well, there's also a lot of the action thriller stuff involved, so it's kind of like
Yes,
the balance of it all. So it's like at least for you, like where specifically your Decker series, where did the idea and where did the love for that kind of, I guess, that genre come from?
I get. I mean, obviously, I think movies are some of it. I've always watched horror movies, action movies, those kind of things, and there's an element of that in it, in as much as, like you said, I see the scene in my head and then I write it.
Hmm.
I'm sure that if they ever make Decker into a movie, which would be great,
Yep.
I will either love it or hate it, because I'll look at it and say, "Oh, that's exactly what I saw in my head," or I'll say, "Oh, they got it all wrong." So,
Yeah.
and they're not going to let me be the director of it. So not unless I crowdsource it and do it myself, which sounds like absolute hell. So
Yeah, not all of us are Jack Carr either, who are literally on set 24/7.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
movies are a part of it, TV shows. Obviously, I loved the X-Files when I
Hmm.
was younger, when those were on. And there's an element of that in Jack Decker. Who's that? John Decker. Um, except, of course, that I didn't follow the FBI route, but there's a slight element of that. But from a literary point of view, um, I guess one of my first influences, I've always read. My grandfather was a huge reader, and he would read everything. He loved Western novels. He loved fantasy stuff. He read Conan the Barbarian, all sorts of stuff like that. He didn't read a ton of horror, but he did read an awful lot of things like the Gore books and the
Hmm.
like Tarnsman of Gore and those kind of high fantasy kind of novels. The Robert E. Howard stuff he read a lot of, and he'd always pass those books over to me, and he'd read like 10 books a week. So I was
Wow.
constantly barraged by books. And then, I mean, I was probably reading Conan the Barbarian when I was 8 years old.
Oh,
So,
geez.
and it's not exactly light fare. I mean, some of the stuff that he put in those books was pretty visceral. I
Oh,
mean, he
yeah.
was cutting people's heads off, and
Hmm.
there were
Yeah,
certain
the remake of it was more closer to the novel than
yes.
Schwarzenegger. So yeah, where it was like over the top brutal. I'm like, well, you don't know a lot about the book then. So,
Right. And, I mean, he was a barbarian, so he was doing
yeah.
barbaric things. But yeah, so I read that stuff. I read a lot of the like Journey to the Center of the Earth and those kind of books as well, because he read those and passed those over to me. The Pellucidar series. So I was reading a lot of the older fantasy and adventure stuff when I was very young. And then as I got older, I obviously, just like everyone who likes horror, I ended up reading Stephen King. And and I'm sure every writer says that Stephen King's there, whatever. But one
It's an
of the
easy
things,
answer. I mean, it is. I
it's an
mean,
easy
it's
answer,
he's
but
It
because he's
makes
so,
sense. Yeah,
yeah.
it makes sense.
But it wasn't really his books so much that inspired me with him, as much as in the front of each book he would write um, a little piece about the book and about his life, and this would be in the front of every book, and it would just be something like, I think in one of the um, story collections, I can't remember which one. I want to say I really can't remember which one, but he put this piece in there about sitting on um, his summer home in the south of Maine, sitting on the deck looking out over the lake. And he's talking about this and talking about how he's talking about writing short stories at this house and putting them together in the book. And it just sounded like a very nice life.
Hmm.
He
Yeah.
had a summer home. He had his main home, obviously, at the time up in Bangor, and it just sounded like the kind of life that would be great. Being an author, you get to write about scary things, and then you get to buy a lot of houses and sit there looking out over your lake. Now, of course, that isn't the reality for most writers, but
Yeah.
the rest of us aren't Stephen King. But there was an element of inspiration in that. For the John Decker series, one of the big inspirations are the writers Preston and Child.
Yep.
They wrote the book Relic. I think it was their first book, their first fiction book.
I think so. Yeah, that's the first book in the Pendergast
Yeah,
series. Yeah,
correct. Yeah,
which became I
a,
guess
a
it would
big
technically be
movie.
a
Yeah,
big movie. I was going to say blockbuster movie, but I don't think it was that. But it did very well considering the genre that it was in.
it did very well. I tried to watch it again recently, and I thought, oh God, this isn't as good as I remember. It
Yeah.
was very, it looked a little bit low budget when I tried to watch it again, but certainly that series, I actually started. I saw the movie of Relic before I realized it was a book, and I started reading their
Same, I think.
books
Yeah.
with the second one, Reliquary, which was, and again, I don't think they probably intended to write a series with that book. Um, they have like a little thing on a little book on Amazon that talks about Pendergast and about how they developed the character. And they actually say in there that they didn't intend for him to be a series character, and that when the publishers wanted a follow up, they had to pick a character to choose to do the follow up, and that was the character they chose, because even though he was weird and aloof and not the most likable guy, the readers liked him. And he wasn't in a lot, Relic, he's not in much of the book.
Yeah, doesn't it? Isn't it a lady? Isn't it a girl that's like
It's
the main
yeah,
character at the museum?
I can't remember. I want to say Nora Kelly, but I'm not sure if that's right. But it's one of the basically one of the museum curator women that ends
Hmm.
up as the main character in that book. So, he only comes into it really almost as a side character. And so the second book was Reliquary, and I picked it up in Gatwick Airport when I was flying over to America to come live here. So
Oh
I read
wow.
it. I
Okay.
read it on the plane on the way over. I think it was 1998. So it had just come out. I read it on the plane on the way over. Then I went back and read Relic, and then I started in with the other books. But by the time I got to Decker, which is what, 2014, when I was writing it, 2015, um, I'd read most of their books, and I think there was an element of influence there. Obviously, there's some influence from like the Clive Cussler stuff. Decker tends to find himself in far-flung locations, and he tends to get involved in action adventure stuff like that. But yeah, those kind of books were really the influence. When I was growing up, I read more straight horror. I would read um, James Herbert, who was a fairly large English horror writer. I don't think he did as well over here, but certainly in England, he was very well known. One of his first books was called The Rats, and it was basically about giant man-eating rats that ran around London killing everyone. Um, and it sounds schlocky, but it actually worked. It was a huge
Yeah.
bestseller, and he ended up with
Okay.
two sequels to it. The last of which, because back then it was still the Cold War. The last of which was set after a nuclear war, where the
Okay.
rats have basically just taken over the city because there's nothing left because it's been hit by a nuclear blast.
Hmm.
So that one almost became well, it was post-apocalyptic. And then I would read books like another author I read a lot. He only wrote very short books, but his name was Guy N. Smith, and he was he only died recently. I think he died of COVID actually. But he was very prolific, but he wrote a lot of very pulpy horror stuff, werewolves, monsters in caves. So that kind of blended in with the earlier influences as well, because I read a lot of those. One of his most famous books, and again, I don't think he was really known over here, but was about killer crabs invading a Cornish town and basically eating everyone. So that whole idea of monsters in books came
Yeah.
from those kind of influences. Um, and
Yeah.
then the more of the writing in general was more people like Stephen King, where I thought, yeah, I could have that life. Looks good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, my biggest influence is Jeremy Robinson, and I talked about him several times,
Right.
and I was just doing arc reading and beta reading for him almost 10 years ago now, and that's how I kind of got into the industry. Is just I started kind of like you behind the scenes, and then realized that, Jeremy's a great guy, but he's a dude. He's a normal
Yeah.
guy. You know what I mean? He's an excellent writer. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, he's not like, in your head you're going, oh, he's just a guy that has a story to tell, and he's very good at it, but he's been doing it
Yeah.
obviously longer than I have. And I'm like, okay. And then as I kind of see the process, and as I kind of see, because there's like a private group, and we'll talk, and or I message him back and forth and ask him about, where did this come from? How did that? And I was picking his brain, and then kind of realized that if I just try, how am I not gonna, how am I not gonna know unless I try?
Right.
And so he's been a huge influence of mine. His stories have, his Jack Ziegler series has been like, very, very big for me. When it comes to the blending of, military thrillers with horror elements, with
Yeah.
historical, with supernatural. It's like he's a master at blending genres. He does some fantasy stuff. He does some horror stuff that he was doing under a pen name. Jeremy Bishop, his Jane Harper series was, oh, so good. It was about like the Norwegian Draga, and it's kind of zombie, kind of undead, kind of, but
I'll have to check those out.
that cultures, there's two of them, and
Yeah.
he's talked about finally writing the third book for it, just because of I don't know if it's publication rights or something, but yeah, the Jane Harper thrillers, there's the Sentinel and the Raven, and then there's a third one that he's going to write to kind of help finally close out the series. But those books are awesome, and they are more of your like straightforward sci-fi
Yeah.
supernatural horror, but they are great.
Hmm.
Jane, the whole book, it's first person, so first person present, so you're in Jane's head, but it's like she's witty, she's like she's got a filthy mouth, her attitude, it's like she's just got this great like air about her, and just the creativeness of that series
Yeah.
is just mind-blowingly cool, and I'm super excited for the third book. So I've been bugging him about it for years, but yeah, it's like for me it was mostly movies, and then as I've uh read more as the years went by, and then as I'm writing, it's definitely more of the authors in the books, but I still have my influences with movies. I'm always rewatching the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
Just it's kind of what I do. I don't like watching new stuff. I'm not a big fan of new content. I'm very much what they say, you don't download or you don't buy a new music album once you hit 30 or whatever they say. It's like you just inevitably stick with your classics, not
Right.
necessarily
Yes.
classics. And movies are the same way. Constantly watching Mummy 99. I'm constantly watching
Yeah.
the cutscene movies of all the Uncharted video games. So it's like 3 hours of all the cinematic cutscenes. I'm not even playing the game, but it's like I'm watching a big 3 hour movie, and it's
Yeah.
fascinating, and I love the characters, and that's Tomb Raider, I was doing that too, and it's fun. I bought the Indiana Jones, the 4 Indiana Jones movies on Prime. They had them on sale, and they're kind of like updated, as far as rendered and stuff. So I'm like, I don't have digital copies of these. Sure, so bought those. Now I watch those while I work. And
So you'll watch the new one that comes out though, right?
oh, I will.
The one
I
they're
will.
making right now.
Yeah, I will. I will. I don't care. People had a lot of problems with the fourth one with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and I understand it, and I get it, and I completely and utterly understand why people didn't like it. But
It was very over the top.
yeah, but that's where I like watching the behind the scenes making of stuff, is
Yeah,
because when I was listening to Spielberg talk about it, um, and they wanted to properly age Indy. So when he was fighting the Nazis in the 30s, and then in early 40s, and then so how old is he now? So they properly aged him,
yeah,
and he was in the Cold War era. He was in the Russian KGB and like that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
it became the Russians were the bad guys now, not the Nazis, because the Nazis they didn't exist at this point, the Nazi party. So he needed another villain. And just in the era of US, the bad guys were the Russians.
yeah,
And he wanted to bring in so if they weren't doing the biblical relics anymore, what would be the next thing? And he just came up with basically the story of Roswell. Because in the movie they talk about an Air Force incident in 47,
yes,
and that's Indy was a part of the crew, which I kind of thought was cool that they included him as like the wreck, the wreck that supposedly crashed in Roswell. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. That just brings Indy kind of into this whole new realm. And
yeah.
the Mutt Williams character was terrible. It was just the portrayal of it was terrible. Like I didn't mind Shia LaBeouf. Like it was just the portrayal of the character was campier than it needed to be. Did he have to be a
Yeah,
greaser? Did he have to be like the knife, the motorcycle?
exactly.
It's like did he have to be a part of like the Travolta greasers? No,
It,
he
it
didn't
was a
have to
bit
be.
over the top.
Yeah, like I like the story. I like the settings. I liked even the B characters. Kate Blanchett was amazing as the villain.
Yeah,
You know, I liked it. It was fun for me. I cried when I watched it the first time in theaters because that was the first Indiana Jones movie I'd ever been able to see in theaters. Because of just when I was born. I was born in the 80s.
right,
So when Last Crusade came out in 89, I was 5. So it was
right.
like I never got to see these movies in theaters. So I grew up with them at home. So when I got to sit in a movie theater watching Indiana Jones, and when I saw the silhouette of him putting the hat on against the army truck at the beginning of the movie, I cried. I had tears running down my face. I was like, I was just, it meant a lot to
Yeah,
me. Did I love
yeah.
it? No, it's my least favorite of the 4 movies, but it meant a lot to me. And that's why this movie, I'll see it and I'm sure I'll be emotional because I also know that this is the send off. So I know that this is it. And as far as what they do with the character in the future, I have no idea. But this is Harrison's send off as Indy, and it's going to be hard. It's going to
I
be.
was kind of surprised they didn't use the Indie Sun plot line to extend the movies from the last one with almost like a spin-off of that.
Yeah, there was talks of that. I think the reason they didn't do it is because of Shy, and because of his troubles and because of
Right.
his personality. And I think that's where they kind of shot themselves in the foot with his casting. Is at the time he was fine, but as the years went by, and then his struggles, and now he's done some fabulous indie movies. I mean, he's a surprisingly very good actor,
Yeah.
but I think it's just come with time and come with growing up and
Yeah.
come with self-realization. But I think if they had cast someone a little straight shooter, a little bit more, I don't know, and marketable,
Yes.
I think they could have gone that route and it wouldn't have been a big surprise. I still think they can. Like that's what they were trying to do with The Mummy,
Right.
with the Dragon Emperor movie, where they brought in the older Alex. They brought in the son, which is now weird because he has an American accent um, in that movie, and they had to recast Rachel Wise because of disagreements going about.
Yeah.
And I was not happy, but
Yeah, that those movies kind of crashed and burned at the end a little bit. They
yeah.
got off track.
Like I loved the second movie because the Mummy Returns because it was the same cast. same story.
And
It was the same
I did
feel.
not like the Tom Cruise remake
Oh God, no, that
that
was
they did.
awful.
That thing was dreadful.
That was, and it killed the Universal movies. Like it
Yeah.
bombed that entire series. So it was like, oops. What are you gonna do? I mean, you can't force the story in order
Right.
to set up something bigger. It has to sell itself.
Exactly.
And they were already planning this huge Universal Monsters thing, but I'm like, dude, you got to hit the first movie first to even remotely
Oh
feel
yeah.
that. Like they had some great actors lined up too. I mean, they had Johnny Depp lined up to be oh, who was he supposed to be? Was he supposed to be Lestat, or was he supposed to be, like, they had some amazing actors lined up. There was a photo of them where when the Mummy came out and it showed like 6 or 7 actors sitting next to each other, and it says Universal
Yeah.
Monsters Universe coming soon. And it had Tom in the middle because that was the first movie of the series. And then it showed these other actors, and one of them being Johnny Depp, one of them being maybe Robert Downey was a part of it. I can't remember, but there's this great picture with all these amazing actors. I'm like, man, if these are the leads in these movies, I'm like, this might be cool. And then nothing happened of it because they lost so much money. Uh, oops.
Which is a shame because they really do have some great monsters in their IP with Universal.
Yeah.
So it's a shame they didn't pursue that. They might, yeah. I mean, they're building this new theme park in Orlando
Hmm.
that's set to open, I think, 2025. And there's a rumor that one of the lands will be the Universal monsters. So that's
That'd
one
be
of the
cool.
things they're developing there. So they may return to it and try to, they may figure enough time has passed that we've all forgotten the Tom Cruise debacle and
The problem is are they really gonna, like, are they really like what we've been saying with Spider-Man for years, and now they got it right now, but are they just gonna, or like Fantastic Four, are they really just gonna keep rebooting it until they get it right? And it's like,
exactly.
you just spent $200+ million on a Tom Cruise movie, which people say Tom Cruise movies don't bomb, just because Top Gun was great. So you're sitting here going, they may not bomb, but that movie destroyed a future franchise, to say the
Exactly.
least, and it didn't have to, and it did. And it's like, here we are.
Yeah.
Now we're second guessing a great monster universe that could be cool. I mean, I don't know, but so moving on, I guess.
Yeah.
I always like to kind of end the show on this point because I know it's just going to open up another can of worms. So if the people watching, and thank you for watching, if you like the content, please subscribe and like the channel. If you want to give somebody recommendation on, if they don't know your work, I'd imagine I know what your answer is going to be, but I'll let you say it. If somebody is going to check out one of your books for the first time, what would it be? And just kind of tell us, I guess, a little bit of why.
Well, I would say obviously it would be it depends what you like. If you like the monster supernatural stuff, it would be the John Decker series for sure. Cold Sanctuary, the second book in the series, is a good entry into that series. Obviously, you better to start with the first book, but I would say for a strong book, probably Cold Sanctuary would be a good start.
Yeah, because that was technically the beginning of this series.
Yes,
Like, as you were
because
saying, because What Vengeance Comes wasn't.
it was meant to be a standalone,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so Cold Sanctuary is where I really start to bring in the characters that will form the series later, and the organizations that they work for, and all the other shady stuff that goes on behind the scenes in the series really starts with that second book. Now, like I said, I am planning to maybe take a look at the first book and do an expanded second edition that fits more with the series and has more of those tones in it, and we've got plans for that, but it isn't going to be probably this year. So Cold Sanctuary, I also think that if you like more of a historical bent to the book, or I like Whitechapel Rising as well because I like the Jack the Ripper aspect.
sure.
It's fun to write about characters like that simply because it's a new take on something that it's just fun to write. So I would say if you want to get into the John Decker series, probably called Sanctuary. If you're more towards straight thrillers, then obviously the A.M. Strong stuff. The first Patterson Blake thriller, which is called Sister, Where Are You? It's about an FBI agent whose sister is missing, and she goes to search for her sister, who she thinks was the victim of a serial killer. So that one is good if you're not so into the monsters. But certainly I would say Cold Sanctuary is the best John Decker to leap in with.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, I always tell people just check out The Forgotten Fortune, my first Jack Riley book. But if we have some fans of yours watching this, I would also suggest checking out my Unseen, my Frank Moon Unseen series.
Absolutely.
And the republish, when this video comes out, the first book will be back out. And then we'll have every other book coming out every month as a republish until February, I guess. So yeah, November, December, January, February. Yeah. And then book 5 in the series, I will have out later next year. And then as I mean, unfortunately, it's also sales related. So
Yeah.
if the books do well and we get a good following behind them, I'm guaranteed to write Abomination is the name of the 5th book. We changed the names, we changed the series, brand new covers from David Behrens, who's an amazing cover artist. I'm helping him doing a little bit of the lettering on the covers, just because as a cover designer, I'm also super anal retentive.
Yeah.
But he's much better at the physical, like post-apocalyptic movie poster look. That's not my style. If you see my Jack Riley
the landscape
covers,
of the cover.
Exactly. He's really good at doing that. So Dave's doing those covers. And it's now Origin, Desolation, Perseverance, Inferno, and now Abomination will be later next year. And if they're received well, I plan on releasing a book a year with that. And then I'm currently writing the 5th Jack Riley book called Venetian Pursuit. And that'll come out early next year. I'm starting another series on my own. It's my first solo series with Conundrum. I'm doing the Zara's Kane series with Nick with the publication, but I have a new series coming out that is starring a gentleman named Alex Wake. And it's actually the first time I've publicly talked about it, but so I'll hint at it. A way to look at it would be, what if Ryan Reynolds played John Wick?
Okay. That's interesting.
So, yeah. And what I can tell you is that the books will mostly take place in like tropical climates. I have this vision of a beach and someone getting beat to death on the beach. And then Alex sitting down and finishing the guy's drink while he's, on the ground all beat up. And in my head, I'm going Deadpool, but not Deadpool. So I'm like, Wickian, not that like ridiculously over the top, which I love, but not that. But I'm like, in my head, I'm going, there needs to be some humor to it, but it's mostly environmental. It's mostly natural. There's no jokes. And I'm like, who could do that? I'm like, man, I really love Ryan Reynolds, the action hero. I just think he portrayed Hitman's Bodyguard, The Adam Project, even some of the stunts he did in Free City, which I thought was one of the best comedies I've seen in a decade. Like, he can do that role so well in Deadpool, obviously. And I'm like, man, what if he is kind of like that jack of all trades, ex-government agent?
Yeah.
Has a little bit of a moral compass left, but not much. And I'm like, I need to write this. I really need to write this. So first book in that series will come probably summer next year. That's the next book I'm writing after I finish with the Venetian Pursuit. So yeah, a lot going on over here, and then I'll finish up the year with the next Zara Kane book. So if anybody's interested, I have my entire writing schedule posted on my website because I want to hold true to it. I want people to expect what's coming from me.
Motivation.
Kind of also, it's motivation, and it keeps me. And if there's questions, people kind of have an idea of what's coming down the pike. But So if you had, I know we've talked about a lot of other authors too, but if there's I know it's a hard question, but if there's a singular book from someone else that you can recommend, whether it's something you've read recently or whether it's one of the Pendergast novels or whatever, is there something that you could, you know, give the reader, give the watcher here,
Oh
something to check
goodness.
out?
Um,
And it's a tough
I
question because there's never one book, but
it is a tough question. I read a lot of different styles of books still.
mhm.
Um,
Doesn't even have to be in your genre. If it's just something that you find fascinating, that's
I
cool.
think for people in my genre, I would probably say probably the last Pendergast novel that was published, Bloodless. Um, it goes a little beyond what they've done before, in terms of B-movie monsters.
Hmm.
So, you know, if you're into the kind of John Decker silliness, then probably that book you would probably like. Um, Other than that, I mean, it's tough. There's so many books that I've read over the last few years. Um, I read one. What was the name of it? The Hunger, I think it was, by an author by the name of Amakatsu, and that was about the Donner Party,
Ooh,
but it was done from a horror novel perspective. Like, what
okay.
if there was something stalking the Donner Party, and and obviously they're the famous group that ended up eating each other
Yeah.
while crossing the crossing to California. So I would say that that one's good if you're looking for some more literary style horror. You know, more serious horror. I think that that would be a good book to read too.
Oh, awesome. That's fantastic. I mean, I would recommend a buddy of mine, Kevin Tomlinson, his Dan Kotler series. Um, it's a really deep series. He does a great job with it. It's those archaeological thrillers that at least my readers are very familiar with.
Right.
And he does go a little more over the top with them as far as like the supernatural elements. So it just gives you that little extra slice that at least personally I'm not implementing into my work, or at least in my current stuff. But it's great. It just goes that little bit, like I said, that little bit over the top, but it still has all of that great historical backing and that depth of research. So I mean, definitely check out Kevin's work. He's great. He's been on the show. He's fun to talk to. He's got a huge podcasting background, so he's very good at speaking and talking, and
Yes.
he has the idea of the show, which I remember when I first started doing this years ago. It was like, oh, I actually have to be like a personality, and luckily I'm not. It's not hard for me to talk to people, considering I was in retail for almost 20 years. Talking to complete strangers is very easy for me, especially in this case when it's something relatable. So
Yes.
the conversation's easy. But yeah, I mean, check out Kevin's work. Um, check out Preston and Child's work, Anthony's work, my work. I mean, that's the great thing about social media today is it's so easy to find anybody. So in this case, if you have a favorite author, typically we have some sort of social media presence where you can find
Right.
us, or just an Amazon presence. So you just type in the name and up pops the work, or websites. But if anyone does have any questions about your work, or at least needs to find it quicker, what's the easiest way to find you and your books?
Easiest way, obviously, is Amazon. Just put
Hmm.
in Anthony M. Strong. I also have the website, anthonymstrong.com, for the supernatural stuff, and AM Strong Author for the straight mystery thriller books. So those are probably the easiest ways to find me. I'm on Facebook as well, under both pen names, and I'm on Twitter, but I really don't do anything on that.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
I
No.
tried, but
It's a lot. It's a lot.
it
That's
is
that's basically a job. It's there's a ton to do as far as getting visibility. Like you have to do it consistently, or else it's just a waste.
exactly.
And I was doing like the live stuff. May have been like Instagram Live or something for a while, and I'm like, I just don't have anything super interesting to talk about that isn't like everyday stuff, because I don't, unless I'm like, this is all I do. So it's like I don't really
Yeah.
have. and y'all hear about it enough on social media as it is, so I don't need to talk about it live any more than I
Exactly.
already do. But yeah, I mean, if anybody has any questions for me, it's mattjamesauthor.com. Any questions about publishing, it's conundrumpub.com. We do take open submissions, so if anybody's got books that they're unsure of how to market and or publish, we will take a submission, look at the manuscript, and see if it's something that we are interested in. We do publish mostly straightforward like action thrillers, but we are more than willing to expand. My Unseen action horror stuff is being published through us. R.L. Kennedy, Randy, she's got her Underground series, which is a post-apocalyptic series that's done really well. But as far as we're not going like romance, we're not going like super hardcore
Right.
horror, or like it's that thrilling, suspenseful storyline is what we're going for. But we are taking open submissions, where we look at them as regularly as we can, as fast as we can, because we also have our own a lot of work to deal with. But yeah, you find me on Facebook everywhere. I'm on Instagram as well. I'm a little on, I don't really do much on Twitter. Now I might, because I might not be shadow banned anymore, but which I don't know if I was, but I also, yeah, we won't go into it, but yeah, yeah, I'm all over the place. If you have any questions, I'm more than willing to talk and answer some questions. Facebook Messenger is easy to get a hold of me. That's how I get a hold of everybody. It's just the easiest media for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, thanks for watching. If like I said, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, on your favorite podcast app. Go ahead and give some likes. Tell your friends. It's just going to help promote the show and promote the authors between myself and whoever I'm talking to every episode, and just kind of help us out and grow all over the place, not just the show, but also our work. So, and we won't be here without our work. So the show doesn't exist without the great authors that are willing to come on and talk. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it. Tony, thanks for coming on and chatting. We'll have
Thank
you
you.
back on.
Awesome.
I definitely want to talk more about the Decker series at a later date. So we'll get you back on, and we'll talk about that extensively. So thank you so much for coming on, my friend, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.